For thousands of years, the galaxy believed it had mapped everything, every star, every empire, every safe trade route. Massive star charts filled the galactic archives. Countless explorers spent their lives traveling between distant suns, scanning unknown planets, and drawing new lines across the endless darkness of space. These maps were the pride of the galaxy. Every generation believed the same thing. The galaxy was finally understood. Nothing important remained hidden, but there was one strange detail that every map shared: a blank region, a massive area where the map simply stopped. No stars marked, no routes drawn, no colonies recorded, just empty space. And written at the edge of that region were two quiet words: human territory. No explanation followed those words, just a border, a line that no one crossed. Young alien students often asked their teachers about it. Why is nothing mapped there? The teachers always gave the same answer: we do not explore that region. But why? The teachers never explained, because the truth was uncomfortable. Long ago, the galaxy did try to map human space, and something happened. Something that made every explorer turn around. Something that made entire civilizations quietly agree on one rule: do not go there. Over time, the memory of that event faded. Empires rose and fell. Wars were fought. New species joined the galactic community. 300 years passed, and slowly, the old fear began to feel like a myth. The younger civilizations started asking questions. Why would an entire region of space remain unexplored? Why would the galaxy fear humans? Humans were not the oldest species. They were not the largest empire. They were simply different, curious, quiet, mysterious. And because of that mystery, curiosity began to grow again. Eventually, someone decided to find the truth. Far from the crowded centers of galactic civilization, near the silent border of human territory, a powerful exploration fleet prepared for a historic mission. The fleet belonged to the Orthel Union, one of the newest powers in the galaxy. Young, confident, ambitious, the Orthel believed the galaxy had grown weak and afraid of old stories. Their leaders believed those ancient warnings were nothing more than myths created by nervous explorers centuries ago. So they decided to do what no one had done for 300 years: cross the border and map human space. At the center of the fleet's command ship stood Admiral Terev. He was tall and calm, his eyes focused on the massive holographic map floating above the bridge floor. Thousands of star systems glowed across the map. Bright lines showed trade routes and military patrol zones. But near the center of the hologram, there was a massive empty space: human territory. Admiral Terev stared at it for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Today," he said calmly, "we fixed the greatest mistake in galactic history." His officers exchanged nervous glances. Some were excited, others were uneasy, because even though the Orthel Union dismissed the old stories, no one else had dared to test them. For 300 years, not one ship, not one probe, not one explorer. The galaxy had simply accepted the blank space. But Admiral Terev refused to believe in fear. He believed humans were just another species, strong perhaps, but not unstoppable. Their technology was impressive, but so was the technology of many other civilizations. There was no reason for an entire galaxy to avoid them. "Move the fleet forward," the Admiral ordered. The command ship began to glide slowly toward the invisible border where the maps ended. Dozens of exploration vessels followed behind it. The moment felt historic, quiet, almost peaceful. The fleet crossed the border. Nothing happened. The stars remained silent. Sensors detected normal radiation levels. Nearby planets drifted calmly through space. The officers began to relax. One of them even laughed. 3 centuries of fear," he said, "for absolutely nothing." Admiral Terev nodded slowly. "Prepare the mapping drones." Dozens of small drones launched from the fleet. They spread out across nearby systems like tiny sparks of light. Their mission was simple: scan the region, map nearby stars, send the data back to the fleet, and prove once and for all that human space was no different from anywhere else. For 10 minutes, everything seemed normal. Data streamed into the fleet's computers. New stars appeared on the holographic map. Officers began celebrating quietly. The blank space was finally disappearing. Then suddenly, one of the drones vanished. No explosion, no warning, just gone. The bridge fell silent. "Report," Admiral Terev said. A sensor officer checked his screen. "Drone 7 has stopped transmitting." "Cause?" "Unknown." Before the Admiral could respond, another drone vanished, then another, and another. Dots of light began disappearing from the holographic map. The officer's hands trembled slightly as he scanned the data. "Sir." Admiral Tyrell looked at him. "What happened to them?" The officer swallowed slowly. "They did not explode." "Then where are they?" The officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "They were erased." A sudden alarm echoed through the bridge. New signals appeared on the scanners. Something massive had just entered the system. Something so large the fleet's sensors struggled to understand it. The holographic map flickered. A massive shape appeared behind the Ortho fleet, silent, motionless, watching. The officer slowly turned toward Admiral Terev. His face had gone pale. "Sir, a human ship has arrived." The bridge of the Ortho command ship fell completely silent. Every officer stared at the holographic display. The massive shape behind their fleet slowly became clearer as the sensors adjusted. At first, it looked impossible. The object was too large, too smooth, too calm. It did not move like a normal warship. It simply appeared, as if it had always been there. The computer finally finished its scan. The result appeared on the screen. Unknown human vessel size, unconfirmed energy output, unmeasurable. Weapon systems, unknown. Even the fleet's advanced scanners could not fully understand the ship. Admiral Terev stared at the image carefully. The human ship was enormous. It was longer than 3 of the Ortho command ships placed side by side. Its surface looked smooth and clean, covered in dark metal plates that reflected the distant stars. Soft white lights glowed across its surface like a quiet heartbeat. There were no visible weapons, no visible engines, yet somehow the ship had appeared behind them without any warning. "How did it get there?" one officer whispered. No one answered. The sensors had detected nothing. No warp jump, no energy spike, no approach signal. The ship had simply arrived. Admiral Terev straightened his posture. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. Before the officer could respond, a calm voice suddenly filled the bridge. The voice came through every speaker in the room. Clear, stable, confident. "This is a border patrol vessel of the Human Defense Network." The officers froze. No communication request had been sent. No channel had been opened. Yet the humans were already speaking to them. The voice continued. "You have crossed into protected territory." Admiral Terev stepped closer to the command console. "This is Admiral Terev of the Ortho Union Exploration Fleet," he said. "We come peacefully. We are mapping unexplored systems." There was a short pause. Then the human voice replied, "We are aware." The calm tone made several officers uncomfortable. The human sounded almost bored. "As you have already discovered," the voice continued, "mapping drones are not permitted inside this region." The admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. "You destroyed our equipment." "No," the voice replied. "We removed it." Admiral Terev glanced at the sensor officer. "Where are the drones now?" The human voice answered simply, "Safe." The admiral felt a strange tension growing in the room. The human ship had not fired. It had not threatened them. But something about the situation felt deeply wrong. "How did you arrive here without detection?" the admiral asked. There was another short pause. "Your sensors are not designed to detect our travel system." Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. The Ortho Union possessed some of the most advanced sensor technology in the galaxy, yet the human ship had bypassed it completely. "State your purpose," the human voice said calmly. Admiral Terev lifted his head. "We are explorers. The galaxy has left this region unmapped for centuries. We are correcting that mistake." Silence followed, long enough to make the officers uncomfortable. Then the human voice spoke again. "The galaxy did not leave this region unmapped by mistake." The words hung in the air. Admiral Terev crossed his arms. "Are you claiming ownership of this entire region?" "No." "Then why prevent exploration?" "No." "Then why prevent exploration?" Another pause. The human voice answered quietly, "Because what lies beyond this border is not meant for the rest of the galaxy." Several officers shifted nervously. Admiral Terev frowned. "That sounds like a threat." "It is not a threat," the human replied. "It is a warning." The admiral turned toward the holographic map. The empty region of human space still stretched across the display. 300 years, he said slowly. "For 300 years, the galaxy has avoided this region because of rumors and old stories." The human voice responded calmly. "They were not rumors." "Then explain them," the admiral demanded. "Explain why the galaxy fears humans." The bridge remained silent. For several seconds, the human ship did not answer. Then something changed on the sensors. The human vessel began transmitting data. Large files flooded the Orthel computers, videos, historical records, combat recordings. The sensor officer's eyes widened as he opened the first file. "Admiral, what is it?" The officer hesitated. "You should see this." A video appeared in the center of the holographic map. It showed an old battle. Hundreds of alien warships fighting something massive in deep space. Strange, dark shapes moved between the stars. Creatures, machines, no one could tell. One by one, the alien fleets were destroyed. Entire armadas vanished in seconds. The recording ended suddenly. Another file opened. This one showed human ships, thousands of them, forming a massive defensive line across a region of space, fighting the same dark enemies, stopping them, pushing them back. The bridge fell silent again. Admiral Tereb stared at the recordings. "What are those things?" he asked quietly. The human voice answered, "The reason your maps stop here." Another file appeared. It showed the same region of space, but this time nothing moved. No enemies, no battles, just a massive defensive wall of human ships guarding the border. "For 3 centuries, the human voice said calmly, we have kept them contained." Admiral Tereb slowly looked toward the massive human ship outside the window. "You are not hiding your territory," he realized. "No," the human replied. "We are guarding it." The admiral felt a chill move to the bridge. "Guarding it? From what?" The human voice answered quietly. "From what lies deeper in this region." The admiral looked back at the holographic map, at the blank space, at the silent stars, and for the first time since crossing the border, he began to understand why the galaxy had stopped asking questions. The bridge of the Orthel command ship remained silent for a long moment. Every officer stared at the holographic recording still floating above the control floor. The images were disturbing. Entire alien fleets destroyed in seconds, massive dark shapes moving through space like living shadows, and human ships holding the line. Admiral Terrell slowly turned toward the main screen that showed the enormous human vessel outside their fleet. It remained completely still, watching, waiting. "You expect us to believe this?" Terev finally asked. The human voice answered calmly through the speakers. "You already do." Terev did not reply, because deep inside, he knew the recordings looked real. Too real. The battle damage on the ships, the panic in the alien communications, the impossible speed of the dark enemies. None of it looked fake. Still, the admiral forced himself to remain calm. "If these enemies are real," he said, "why has the galaxy never heard about them?" The human voice answered quietly, "Because we made sure they never had to." A strange feeling spread across the bridge. Confusion, unease, fear. The sensor officer suddenly raised his hand. "Admiral, new readings." "What is it?" The officer pointed at the scanner display. "Energy movement, deeper inside human territory." The admiral walked toward the console. The sensors showed a faint disturbance far beyond the border. At first it looked small, just a flicker of strange energy, but the computers struggled to analyze it. "Magnify the signal," Terev ordered. The image expanded. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the hologram adjusted. Now the officers could see something moving in the distance. Something massive, something wrong. It did not move like a ship. It twisted slowly through the darkness between stars. Long shapes stretched across space like shadows. "What is that?" one officer whispered. The human voice answered immediately. "Observation only." The admiral frowned. "That is not an answer. It is the only one you need." The bridge crew stared at the distant shapes. There were several of them now, drifting slowly, almost like they were searching. Then one of the shadows moved faster. The shape expanded across the scanner screen. The sensor officer gasped. "Admiral, its size. How large?" The officer swallowed. "Larger than a planet." The entire bridge froze. No one spoke. Even Admiral Tereb struggled to remain calm. The human voice returned. "You see now why the maps end here." The admiral slowly looked back at the screen. "What are those things?" Another pause. Then the human answered. "We do not know what they originally were. That is not possible. It is the truth." The human continued speaking in the same calm tone. "They appeared in this region nearly 400 years ago. At first they were few, small, slow, but they grow." Another shadow appeared on the scanners, then another. The officer counted quickly. 7, 8, 9 objects. The admiral felt a cold feeling in his chest. "How many of them exist?" he asked. "Thousands." The bridge crew stared in disbelief. "If there are thousands," Tiref said slowly, "then why have they not spread across the galaxy?" The human voice answered, "Because they cannot cross the barrier." Terev looked confused. "What barrier?" "Outside the viewing window. The massive human ship suddenly moved for the first time. It rotated slowly in space, and as it turned, a massive structure appeared behind it. The officers gasped. At first it looked like a distant star. Then the sensors zoomed closer. It was not a star. It was a massive wall, an enormous line of structures stretching across the edge of human territory. Thousands of stations, millions of ships, all connected by glowing streams of energy. A defensive line, a barrier between two regions of space. Humanity built this wall 3 centuries ago, the human voice explained, to contain them. The admiral stared in disbelief. This is impossible. No, the human replied calmly. It is necessary. The sensors suddenly screamed with warning signals. The shadows in the distance were moving faster now. One of them slammed into the invisible barrier. A massive wave of energy exploded across the defensive wall. The Orthel fleet shook violently. Even from this distance, the shock wave reached them. The officers grabbed their stations. What was that? One of them shouted. The human voice remained calm. That is what we protect the galaxy from. The admiral slowly looked back at the human ship. And if this barrier fails? There was silence for several seconds. Then the human voice answered. Then every star map in the galaxy will become meaningless. The admiral felt the weight of those words. For the first time since beginning the mission, Admiral Terev realized the terrible truth. The galaxy had not stopped exploring human territory because it feared humans. It stopped exploring because humans were standing between the galaxy and something far worse. The Orthel fleet floated silently near the border of human territory. No one on the command bridge spoke. Every officer stared at the massive structure now visible beyond the human patrol ship. The scanners slowly expanded their range. What they saw made several officers forget to breathe. The structure was not just a defensive line. It was a wall across space itself. Thousands of enormous stations stretched from one star system to another. Millions of human ships moved slowly between them. Energy beams connected the stations like glowing threads of light. The entire structure formed a barrier so vast that the fleet's computers could not calculate its full size. Admiral Terev stepped closer to the viewing window. For a moment, he forgot about pride, forgot about exploration, forgot about proving the galaxy wrong, because the truth was now impossible to ignore. Humanity had built something far beyond anything the Orthel Union had ever imagined. 3 centuries, the admiral said quietly. You built all of this in 3 centuries? The calm human voice answered. We started building the wall 294 years ago. Terev shook his head slowly. That kind of construction would require the resources of dozens of empires. Yes. The admiral turned back to the screen. You did this alone? Another short pause. Then the human replied, yes. Several officers exchanged stunned looks. The Orthel Union was powerful, but even their entire civilization could not build something this large. Yet humanity had done it quietly, without telling the rest of the galaxy. Without asking for help, the sensor officer suddenly raised his voice. Admiral, the shadow objects are approaching the barrier again. The holographic map zoomed toward the distant enemy shapes. 9 massive shadows drifted toward the defensive wall. Their movement was slow but steady. As they approached the barrier, the human stations began to glow brighter. Energy built across the structure. A moment later, the shadows attacked. The creatures slammed against the invisible energy shield. The bridge lights flickered. Even from this distance, the shock wave shook the Orthel ships. Then something incredible happened. Human ships launched from the wall, hundreds of them, then thousands. They moved in perfect formation, fast, precise, fearless. The officers watched in stunned silence. Human warships surrounded the massive shadow creatures. Bright beams of energy struck the monsters. The creatures fought back. Dark energy spread across space like smoke. But the human fleet did not retreat. More ships joined the battle. The creatures began to fall back toward the darkness beyond the barrier. Within minutes, the attack was over. The shadows retreated. The human ships calmly returned to their positions along the wall. The barrier slowly dimmed again. Everything returned to silence. The Orthel bridge remained frozen. Admiral Terev slowly exhaled. That battle alone would destroy most galactic fleets, he said quietly. The human voice answered. That was a small attack. The admiral looked back at the screen. A small attack? Yes. How often do they attack? Every few days. The officers looked at each other in disbelief. Every few days. For centuries. Humanity had been fighting these creatures constantly, and the galaxy had never known. Terev crossed his arms slowly, so the galaxy stopped exploring this region because the older empires discovered this war. Yes. And they agreed to keep the secret. Yes. The admiral stared at the defensive wall again. That means the galaxy owes humanity its survival. The human voice remained calm. We did not build the wall for gratitude. Then why? The answer came quietly. Because someone had to. The admiral felt a strange mixture of emotions, respect, shock, and something else, shame. For centuries, the galaxy had believed humans were mysterious and dangerous. Some even called them unpredictable. But now the truth looked very different. Humanity was not hiding. Humanity was standing guard, protecting the rest of the galaxy from something no one else even knew existed. The sensor officer suddenly spoke again. Admiral, new movement beyond the barrier. The hologram zoomed out again. This time the officers saw something far worse. The distant darkness began to move. Not 9 shadows, not 10, hundreds. Massive shapes drifting slowly toward the wall. The officer's voice trembled. Admiral, this is not a patrol attack. Terev looked at the human ship outside the window. What is happening? The human voice answered calmly. A larger wave. How large? The human paused for a moment, then replied. Large enough that we will need every ship available. The admiral felt the weight of those words. Then he realized something important. His fleet was still inside human territory, and the battle was about to begin. For the first time since the mission started, Admiral Terev understood why the galaxy had stopped asking questions, because beyond this border, war never ended. The warning alarms inside the Orthel command ship suddenly grew louder. Red lights flashed across the bridge. Every officer rushed to their stations. On the holographic map, the distant darkness was changing. The shadows were multiplying. At first, there had been 9, then dozens. Now the scanners showed hundreds of massive shapes, slowly drifting toward the human defensive wall. The sensor officer stared at the numbers in disbelief. Admiral, I cannot calculate their exact count. Estimate. The officer swallowed. More than 200, and still increasing. The bridge fell silent again. Admiral Terev slowly turned toward the massive human ship outside their fleet. For the first time since the mission began, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not fear of humans. Fear of what humans were fighting. The calm human voice returned through the speakers. You should leave this region immediately. Terev crossed his arms. You are preparing for battle, yes. Then our fleet will assist. Several officers turned toward him in shock. The human voice answered calmly. That will not be necessary. We crossed your border without permission, Terev said firmly. The least we can do is help defend it. There was a short pause. Then the human voice replied, Your ships are not designed to fight these enemies. The admiral looked at the approaching shadows on the scanner. They were strong enough to destroy the fleets in your recordings. Yes, and yet you still fight them. Another short silence followed. Then the human answered quietly, Because we have no choice. Outside the viewing window, the human patrol ship suddenly began to move. Its engines glowed softly as it turned toward the distant wall. Kazil. The enormous vessel moved faster than anything the Ortho fleet had ever seen. Within seconds, it joined the growing human armada near the barrier. More ships were appearing now. Thousands of human vessels launched from hidden stations. Massive carriers opened their hangars. Entire squadrons of fighters poured into space. Energy fields across the defensive wall began to glow brighter. The barrier was preparing for impact. The sensor officer spoke again. Admiral, the enemy shapes are accelerating. The shadows were no longer drifting slowly. They were moving quickly now. Massive dark forms twisting through space like living storms. One of the officers whispered nervously, What are they made of? The human voice answered, We still do not know. Machines? Possibly. Creatures? Possibly. Then what do you call them? There was a long pause. Then the human answered, Hunters. The word hung in the air. Outside the fleet, the first wave of shadows reached the barrier. The impact shook the entire region of space. Energy exploded across the defensive wall like a storm of lightning. The Ortho fleet rocked violently. Several officers grabbed their consoles to stay balanced. Then the human counterattack began. Thousands of human warships surged forward. Bright beams of energy filled the darkness. Explosions flashed across the battlefield. The shadow creatures fought back with strange waves of dark energy. Entire sections of space twisted and warped as they attacked. But the human fleet held its formation. Precise, disciplined, fearless. The officers watched the battle in stunned silence. One of the shadow creatures suddenly broke through the barrier. It moved toward the nearest human station. The creature was enormous. Its body stretched across hundreds of kilometers. Dark energy flowed around it like smoke. The The station fired everything it had, but the creature continued forward. Admiral Terev leaned toward the screen. They cannot stop it. The human voice responded calmly. Watch. 3 human battleships suddenly appeared beside the creature. Their hulls glowed with intense blue light. A moment later, they fired. A massive beam of energy struck the creature directly. The shadow twisted violently. Its body collapsed into fragments of dark energy. Then it vanished completely. The officers gasped. That weapon, the sensor officer checked his readings. Admiral, that energy output is greater than a star reactor. Terev slowly shook his head. You built weapons powerful enough to destroy those things. Yes, the human voice replied. But we only use them when necessary. The battle continued across the wall. One by one, the shadow creatures were pushed back. Some were destroyed. Others retreated into the deep darkness beyond the barrier. Finally, the battlefield grew quiet again. The defensive wall remained standing. The human ships slowly returned to their positions. The alarms on the Orthel bridge faded. The officers stared at the scanners. The enemy signals were disappearing. Admiral Terev slowly exhaled. That battle would have destroyed half the galaxy. The human voice answered calmly. That is why we fight it here. Terev looked at the endless defensive wall again, and finally he understood something that had confused the galaxy for centuries. Human territory was not hidden. Human territory was a front line, and humanity had been fighting this war alone for 300 years, quietly, without recognition, without thanks, protecting a galaxy that never even knew it was in danger. The battlefield slowly returned to silence. The last human ships moved back into formation along the massive defensive wall. Energy across the barrier faded from bright blue to a soft glow. The shadow creatures had retreated, for now. Inside the Orthel command ship, the bridge crew remained frozen. No one spoke. They had just witnessed a war that the rest of the galaxy had never seen, a war that had been happening for centuries. Admiral Terev stood quietly near the viewing window. Far in the distance, thousands of human ships continued their patrols across the enormous defensive line. They moved calmly, like soldiers who had done this many times before. The admiral finally broke the silence. How long have you been fighting them? The human voice answered through the speakers. 312 years. Several officers slowly looked at each other. 3 centuries of constant battle. And no one outside this region had known. The admiral folded his arms. And in all that time, none of them escaped the barrier? Not one, the human replied. Terev nodded slowly. So the galaxy was never in danger. The human voice paused for a moment. Then it answered quietly. The galaxy was always in danger. The words made the bridge feel colder. The admiral turned back toward the screen. If this wall failed, what would happen? Another pause. Then the humans spoke. They would spread. How far? The answer came without hesitation. Everywhere. The officers stared at the massive wall again. For the first time, they realized something important. The barrier was not just protecting human space, it was protecting everyone else. The sensor officer suddenly raised his hand again. Admiral, new signals from the wall. The holographic display zoomed toward the defensive line. Human ships were moving again. But this time, they were not preparing for battle. They were repairing damage. Stations slowly adjusted their shields. Construction drones began rebuilding weakened sections. The entire system worked like a living machine. Efficient, organized, endless. Admiral Terev spoke quietly. You built all of this alone? Yes. And the galaxy never helped? No. The admiral lowered his head slightly. That seems unfair. The human voice answered calmly. We never asked. Why not? Because the galaxy deserves peace. The officers stared at the speakers in silence. Humanity had chosen to fight a hidden war so that the rest of the galaxy could live without fear. Without even knowing the danger existed, Terev slowly walked back toward the center of the bridge. He looked again at the holographic star map floating above the floor. Thousands of explored systems glowed across the display. But near the center of the map, the blank space remained. Human territory. A region the galaxy refused to explore. Now he finally understood why. Not because humans were dangerous, not because humans were mysterious, but because human space was not just territory. It was a shield, a front line, a silent battlefield protecting trillions of lives. The human voice spoke again. Your fleet will now be escorted back to the border. Admiral Terev nodded slowly. We will leave. A navigation officer began adjusting the fleet's course. But before the ships moved, the admiral asked one final question. Why show us the truth? There was a short pause, then the human answered, "Because your fleet already crossed the border. That does not explain why you trusted us." Another pause followed. Then the human voice said quietly, "The galaxy once trusted us to guard this region. And now? Now you understand why." Admiral Tarev looked once more at the endless defensive wall. Then he nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "I do." The Orthal fleet slowly turned away from the barrier. Their ships began traveling back toward the border of known space. Behind them, the human wall remained standing, silent, watchful. As the fleet approached the edge of human territory, the holographic map updated. The blank region appeared once again, unchanged, unexplored, untouched. Admiral Terra stared at it one last time. For centuries, explorers had believed the galaxy stopped there. Now he knew the truth. The map did not stop because no one had explored further. The map stopped because humanity was standing guard, and some parts of the galaxy were better left uncharted. When the Ortho fleet finally returned to civilized space, they reported their findings to the Galactic archives. The official record was short, simple, clear. The map remains correct. Exploration beyond human territory is not recommended. No explanation followed. No details were given. And from that day forward, the galactic maps remained exactly the same. Because those who had seen the truth understood one thing: the galaxy did not avoid human space out of fear. It avoided it out of respect. And far beyond that border, humanity continued its silent watch, guarding the stars, protecting a galaxy that would probably never know how close it had come to darkness.